Contextualizing moral messages in Bible stories involves understanding the deeper ethical and moral teachings embedded within biblical narratives beyond their literal or historical context. This process requires examining the cultural, historical, and theological backdrop of each story to extract the intended teachings. Such contextualization is crucial because it allows us to appreciate the enduring relevance of these stories and how they can inform contemporary ethical decision-making. The significance of contextualizing moral messages lies in its ability to bridge ancient wisdom with modern life. Bible stories, with their timeless lessons, offer insight into human nature and moral dilemmas still prevalent today. By unpacking these lessons, individuals can find guidance and inspiration in facing personal and societal challenges. This process also fosters a deeper understanding of the Bible, encouraging individuals to engage with it not just as a religious text, but as a source of moral philosophy. Consider the story of the Good Samaritan. On the surface, it is a parable about one man's kindness. However, contextualization reveals lessons about compassion across cultural and social divides, urging readers to transcend prejudices. Another example is the story of Joseph, whose journey from betrayal and imprisonment to forgiveness and leadership provides rich insights into resilience, forgiveness, and divine providence. These narratives encourage us to reflect on our own actions and the broader impact we can have on the world. Many theologians and scholars support the idea that Bible stories contain layered meanings. They argue that these stories are not meant to be taken at face value, but rather explored for deeper understanding, providing moral and ethical guidance relevant in any era. However, this approach is not without challenges. Some critics argue that too much emphasis on moral allegory can lead to subjective interpretations that stray from the original intent. Others worry that such interpretations might dilute the spiritual essence of the Bible, transforming it into mere moral tales rather than religious doctrine. Contextualizing the moral messages within Bible stories connects to broader themes of ethical reflection and spiritual growth. It influences how individuals interact with both sacred texts and secular moral questions, potentially enhancing their capacity for empathy and ethical reasoning. By integrating these insights into daily life, individuals can apply ancient wisdom to modern dilemmas, enriching their moral landscape and fostering a more compassionate and just society. Parables are succinct, allegorical stories that convey deeper moral or spiritual lessons, often through simple, relatable narratives. In the context of biblical stories, parables serve as a vessel for conveying complex ethical teachings in a form that is accessible and engaging. They are didactic tools used by figures such as Jesus to impart wisdom and provoke reflection, often urging listeners to interpret and internalize deeper truths about human behavior, morality, and the divine. The role of parables is crucial in unpacking hidden lessons within Bible stories due to their layered meanings. They offer a framework for understanding ethical principles in a nuanced way, prompting listeners to engage with and interpret stories beyond their literal occurrences. This allegorical method fosters a personal experience with moral questions, inviting introspection and dialogue. Parables are significant as they encourage believers and scholars alike to wrestle with the underlying messages, thereby promoting a comprehensive understanding of biblical teachings. For instance, the parable of the Good Samaritan underscores themes of compassion and neighborly love across cultural and religious boundaries, teaching that true kindness transcends societal prejudices. Another notable example is the parable of the Prodigal Son, which highlights themes of forgiveness and reconciliation, illustrating the joy of redemption and the unconditional love of a father. These stories transcend their historical contexts, offering timeless lessons applicable in diverse, modern situations, from fostering inclusive communities to personal journeys of forgiveness. Many theologians and scholars support the use of parables in biblical teachings for their ability to provoke thoughtful engagement and interpretation. C.S. Lewis, for instance, appreciated their narrative power, identifying parables as vital to understanding complex theological concepts. However, the allegorical nature of parables can present challenges. Interpretations can vary widely, leading to potential misapplications or oversimplifications of the lessons. Some critics argue that the ambiguity inherent in parables allows for subjective interpretation, which can dilute the intended message. Additionally, in a secular context, there might be a tendency to dismiss the religious and spiritual depth of these narratives as mere folklore. Despite these challenges, parables remain integral to exploring the moral messages within Bible stories, bridging the gap between ancient teachings and contemporary ethical dilemmas. They influence other aspects of the main topic by providing a framework for interpreting the Bible's moral teachings, encouraging active participation, critical thinking, and dialogue in the pursuit of a deeper understanding of human values and divine principles. Old Testament narratives, foundational moral teachings, refers to the idea that the stories within the Old Testament of the Bible offer fundamental moral lessons that have shaped ethical perspectives throughout history. These narratives, which include tales of creation, covenant, prophecy, and law, not only provide religious context but also convey profound ethical teachings. These moral underpinnings are significant as they have influenced religious, philosophical, and cultural frameworks across societies. For instance, the story of Cain and Abel in Genesis illustrates themes of jealousy, responsibility, and the consequences of letting emotions govern actions. This narrative underscores a timeless moral teaching about the dangers of envy and the importance of self-control. Another example is the story of Moses and the Ten Commandments, which introduces a codified moral and ethical standard that has permeated legal systems and moral codes worldwide. These narratives offer insights that, while religious in origin, address universal human concerns, providing guidance on issues of justice, integrity, and compassion. Supporters of this viewpoint argue that Old Testament stories contain enduring moral value because they address elemental aspects of human nature and society. Many scholars believe that these stories are metaphoric blueprints that help individuals and communities navigate moral dilemmas and ethical decision-making. However, the moral lessons within these narratives are not without controversy. Some critics argue that the historical and cultural context of the Old Testament should be considered, as certain teachings may seem outdated or problematic when interpreted literally in a modern context. Issues such as patriarchal views or the moral complexities of some characters can present challenges when extracting lessons for contemporary society. Additionally, alternative viewpoints suggest that focusing solely on the moral teachings within these texts might overlook their spiritual or theological significance. Despite these challenges, the moral teachings derived from Old Testament stories remain integral to discussions around ethics and morality. They provide a foundation for exploring deeper moral questions and contribute to the broader tapestry of ethical thought. These narratives complement other biblical stories, including those of the New Testament, which often build upon Old Testament morals, offering more nuanced insights into themes such as forgiveness and love. Ultimately, Old Testament narratives serve as a keystone in unpacking the moral messages embedded within Bible stories, highlighting their enduring relevance and capacity to impart wisdom across generations. New Testament insights, evolving ethical perspectives, refers to the examination of moral and ethical teachings found within the New Testament of the Bible and how these teachings demonstrate a progression or development of ethical understanding compared to earlier biblical texts. This concept is significant because it highlights the dynamic nature of moral teachings within the Bible, showing how they adapt to cultural, historical, and social contexts while providing enduring lessons for readers. One example of evolving ethical perspectives is Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, where he introduces a more profound interpretation of Old Testament laws. For instance, while the Old Testament promotes the principle of retributive justice, an eye for an eye, Jesus encourages turning the other cheek, suggesting a move towards forgiveness and non-retaliation. This reflects a shift from external adherence to the law towards understanding the principles of love and grace that underpin them. Another example is the parable of the Good Samaritan, which challenges social norms of discrimination and prejudice. By making a Samaritan the group despised by Jews, the hero of the story, Jesus redefines what it means to love one's neighbor, encouraging inclusivity and compassion that transcend societal boundaries. Supporters argue that these evolving narratives demonstrate the potential for moral growth and adaptation, suggesting that biblical teachings remain relevant and can guide contemporary ethical decisions. They emphasize that understanding these lessons helps in applying morality in a modern and diverse world. However, the idea of evolving ethical perspectives is not without controversy. Some critics argue that changing interpretations may dilute the original teachings, leading to uncertainties about Imam's absolute moral standards. Others may see it as a challenge to biblical inerrancy, where the notion of evolution implies a need to adapt supposedly divine imperatives. This discourse on ethical evolution influences other aspects of interpreting Bible stories by encouraging readers to consider historical context and cultural relevance. It suggests that the lessons within these stories are not rigidly fixed, but open to reinterpretation as humanity grows in understanding and awareness. Exploring these insights allows for the construction of a more holistic view of Christian teachings and highlights their potential to foster moral reflection and dialogue in diverse societies. This continuity and adaptability underscore the richness of Bible stories in conveying enduring moral messages across generations.